In a world where betrayal, revenge, and redemption collide, Amara Udo's life takes a shocking turn. If you enjoy captivating stories filled with suspense, emotion, and unexpected twists, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful tales. Amara's days in prison had stretched on. The clanging of metal doors, the harsh fluorescent lights, and the unyielding concrete walls of her cell all bore witness to the slow, relentless erosion of hope. Yet amidst the darkness of her confinement, a single visitor had recently stirred something deep within her, a faint glimmer that perhaps her story was not as final as it seemed. It was a cool morning when Ifeanyi, a determined young lawyer with the Innocence Project, arrived for a visitation session. As Amara was led into the small, sparse visitation room, her heart pounded with an anxious anticipation. The room was modest, its bare walls and a simple metal table, a stark contrast to the opulence of her former life. But even here there was a promise, a chance to fight back against the overwhelming tide of despair. Ifeanyi greeted her warmly, her eyes reflecting empathy and resolve. "Amara," she said softly, extending a steady hand, "I'm here because I believe there might be more to your case than what's been presented." Her voice was gentle, yet filled with a quiet strength that made Amara's pulse quicken. For a long moment, Amara simply stared at her, her mind swirling with uncertainty. Could it be that someone was still fighting for her, that the evidence which had sealed her fate might be challenged? The lawyer's words stirred long-dormant feelings within her, a mixture of desperation and a spark of hope. As Ifeanyi spoke, she explained that during a routine review of Amara's case files, her team had come across inconsistencies in the evidence surrounding Ekong's death. The autopsy report, the jar of herbs found in her kitchen, even the testimonies, all painted a picture of a calculated, deliberate act. Yet something about it all did not sit right with Ifeanyi. There were discrepancies, small details that hinted at a hidden narrative, one that might exonerate Amara if only the truth were uncovered. Amara listened, her eyes fixed on the table in front of her, as if trying to absorb every word. Memories of that fateful day, the painful collapse of Ekong, his pained expression, and the terror of watching him fade away, washed over her in a tide of sorrow and confusion. She had always maintained that she had only wanted peace, that the herbs were meant to ease his relentless aggression, not to kill him. Now, as Ifeanyi's voice filled the room with cautious optimism, Amara found herself questioning whether she had been set up, or if there was more to this tragedy than she had ever imagined. With measured calm, Ifeanyi began asking the questions that had been weighing on her mind. "Amara, can you tell me exactly how you came to possess the herbal mixture?" she asked, her tone neutral yet insistent. Amara hesitated, then recalled the desperate plea she had made to Blessing, the trusted housemaid who had always been there in the background of her tormented life. I asked Blessing for help," Amara whispered, her voice trembling as she recounted the memory. "I was at my wit's end. I couldn't bear Ekong's constant demands anymore. Blessing said she knew someone, a herbalist, who could give me something to make him calmer." A silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Ifeanyi's eyes narrowed slightly, her mind already piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that seemed to be far more complex than a simple act of desperation. "And you trusted her then?" Ifeanyi's question was gentle yet laced with a hint of urgency. Amara nodded slowly, guilt and uncertainty mingling in her eyes. "Yes, I had no other choice. I thought it was the only way to get a moment of peace." Outside, the clamor of the prison seemed to fade into the background as the two women continued to talk, their conversation delving into the minutiae of that tragic period. Ifeanyi explained that her team had discovered new forensic details that suggested the herbs might have been far more potent than what any legitimate herbal remedy should be. This revelation, combined with discrepancies in Blessing's account of how she obtained the mixture, cast doubt on the official narrative. There was a growing suspicion that someone might have deliberately manipulated the situation, using Amara as an unwitting pawn in a far more sinister plot. As Ifeanyi spoke, Amara felt a tumultuous mix of emotions: anger at the betrayal, sorrow for the life that had been stolen from her, and a cautious, flickering hope that perhaps justice was still within reach. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she dared to imagine a future where the truth might set her free, where the full story of Enkay's death could be uncovered and her name cleared. In that cramped visitation room with its cold metal table and unforgiving light, Amara realized that the fight was far from over. Though her cell had become a prison in every sense of the word, the unexpected arrival of Ifeanyi had opened a door to a hidden truth that could one day lead to her redemption. And even if the road ahead was fraught with obstacles and peril, Amara knew that for the first time in months, she was no longer alone in her struggle. The conversation ended with a promise from Ifeanyi that her team would continue digging, that they would leave no stone unturned in their quest for justice. As Amara was led back to her cell, she clutched that promise close to her heart, a fragile ember of hope amidst the relentless darkness. Despite the overwhelming odds, despite the crushing weight of betrayal and despair, a small part of her believed that her story was not yet finished, that the truth, however elusive, was still out there waiting to be revealed. Blessing's story began long before the events that had now entangled Amara and her fate. In a small, humble village far removed from the opulence of the Udo mansion, Blessing grew up with little more than hope and a fragile resilience. As a young girl, she had dreamed of a life filled with dignity and love, but life had other plans, and the cruel realities of exploitation and injustice quickly marred those dreams. When Blessing was barely in her teens, circumstances forced her to leave her village and seek work in the big city. She found employment as a housemaid in a grand estate, one that belonged to the Udo family. Despite the glittering wealth and the luxurious surroundings, Blessing's days were marked by quiet hardship and long hours of labor. In that imposing mansion, she was just another worker, expected to serve without question. Yet behind her gentle eyes and soft smile, a burning determination slowly took root. In the early years of her service, Blessing endured the silent indignities of subservience. She learned to navigate the delicate hierarchy of the household, often keeping her head down and her opinions unspoken. However, everything changed one fateful night, a night that would forever alter the course of her life. After the wife had finally left the mansion in disgrace, the mansion's corridors were quiet, almost empty of the usual bustle. It was then that Enkay, in a drunken stupor fueled by his unchecked arrogance and entitlement, returned unexpectedly. That night, as the mansion lay draped in darkness and silence, Enkay's inebriated footsteps echoed through the hallways. For Blessing, who had been diligently completing her duties, the sound of his return sent a jolt of dread through her heart. She had learned over time that behind the mask of charm and power, Enkay was capable of unspeakable cruelty. That night, his true nature erupted like a violent storm. In a moment of unimaginable violation, Enkay cornered Blessing in one of the dimly lit servant corridors. His words were slurred and venomous as he advanced, and his eyes, which usually exuded a cold, calculated calm, burned with a predatory gleam. The brutality of his actions, an act of sexual assault that left her feeling both violated and utterly powerless, would haunt Blessing for the rest of her days. More than the physical violation, it was the cruel threat that followed, a promise to destroy her life if she ever dared speak of what had happened. He sneered, "If you tell anyone, I'll have you fired, your reputation ruined, and your future destroyed." In that moment, the mansion transformed into a prison of fear for Blessing, and her spirit, once so full of hope, was crushed under the weight of humiliation and despair. That night, as she wept in solitude in the servants' quarters, Blessing's mind churned with a mixture of pain and a newfound burning desire for retribution. She vowed then and there that she would never allow herself to be a victim again. Her silent promise echoed in the empty room, a promise to exact revenge on the man who had not only humiliated her, but had also symbolized all the power and privilege that oppressed her. The mansion, with all its grandeur, had become the arena of her personal war. Though she would continue to serve its inhabitants with a quiet professionalism, beneath that calm exterior, a dangerous plan was taking shape. Over the following months, while her outward duties continued uninterrupted, Blessing meticulously observed every detail of Ekong's routine and habits. She learned the exact times he expected his tea, the moments when he was most vulnerable, and the secret passages where the servants moved unnoticed. Slowly, she began to forge connections with those who, like her, harbored silent resentments against the oppressive household. Yet, even as these alliances formed, the seed of her vengeance remained a deeply personal, unspoken oath. When Amara, desperate and isolated, reached out for help, it was Blessing who seized the opportunity. Recognizing that Amara's plight and her own longing for revenge were intertwined, Blessing discreetly arranged to provide Amara with a seemingly innocuous parcel. Inside that small package was a jar containing a dark, powdery substance. To anyone unaware, it would have appeared to be nothing more than an herbal remedy, a concoction purportedly made by a local herbalist to ease tension and calm an overbearing temper. In truth, it was a carefully prepared poison, potent enough to sap the life from a man over time. For Blessing, it was the key to fulfilling her long-held promise of retribution. The night before the fateful events that would seal Ekong's destiny, Blessing ensured that the jar was delivered to Amara with just the right amount of subtlety. She watched from the shadows as Amara's trembling hands unwrapped the package, the contents glistening dully in the low light. In that quiet moment, Blessing's heart pounded with a mix of triumph and sorrow. She knew that the path ahead was fraught with peril, for both Amara and herself. Yet for Blessing, this was the only means of reclaiming a part of her shattered dignity. The poison, disguised as a remedy, was the instrument of her vengeance. In the days that followed, the herbal mixture began to take its toll on Ekong. Though Amara had believed that the remedy might grant her a fleeting peace, Blessing's secret plan was already set in motion. Every dose, every carefully measured pinch was a step closer to the moment of retribution that had been so long in the making. For Blessing, the act was not one of cold calculation alone. It was a desperate cry for justice against the cruelty that had marked her life. Even as Amara noticed subtle changes in Ekong, the true origins of the poison remained hidden behind the facade of an herbal remedy. Ifeanyi's investigation would eventually cast light on these dark secrets, unraveling the threads of a twisted conspiracy. But for now, in the hidden corners of the mansion, Blessing's quiet vendetta continued to unfold, a hidden story of abuse, betrayal, and the dangerous power of revenge. Thus, as the wheels of fate turned inexorably toward an unexpected climax, Blessing's past, filled with pain, injustice, and an unyielding desire for retribution, became the silent force that would reshape everything. The poison was not merely a means to an end. It was the embodiment of a long-suppressed rage, a testament to the lengths one could go when pushed beyond the limits of endurance. And in the dim corridors of the Udo mansion, the echoes of that past betrayal would reverberate, setting the stage for a truth that would shatter the carefully constructed facade of power and control. In that moment of bitter reflection, as Blessing's secret plan lay hidden behind the guise of an herbal remedy, the weight of her betrayal and her determination to reclaim her dignity became inescapably real. The past, with all its scars and secrets, had finally found a way to resurface, weaving a tale of vengeance that would not be silenced. Amara sat on the edge of her cot, staring at the cold concrete wall of her prison cell. Ifeanyi's questions lingered in her mind, stirring up memories she had tried to bury. How had it come to this? How had she been so blind? As the pieces of the puzzle slowly began to resurface, Amara recalled every detail of that desperate day, the day she had reached out to Blessing. Back then, Blessing had been a quiet, steady presence in the household. She had always done her job efficiently, never speaking unless spoken to, never stepping out of line. Amara had trusted her, and in her desperation, she had turned to Blessing for help. But now, after Ifeanyi's visit, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was something she had overlooked. When Ifeanyi returned the following week, Amara was ready. She wanted answers just as much as Ifeanyi did. Sitting across from the lawyer in the cold, sparse visitation room, Amara recounted the events as clearly as she could, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and regret. "I was desperate," Amara admitted, her eyes downcast. "Enkay, he wouldn't leave me alone. Every night, every day, it was like he wanted to possess me completely. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I just wanted peace." Her voice cracked, and she swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "Blessing had always been kind to me. I thought I could trust her. She said she knew someone who could help, a herbalist." "What exactly did she tell you?" Ifeanyi asked gently, leaning closer, her pen poised over her notebook. "She said the herbs would calm him down," Amara whispered, "that they would make him less demanding. I didn't question it. I just wanted it to stop." Ifeanyi nodded, her expression thoughtful. "And did she tell you where she got the herbs?" Amara frowned, trying to remember. "She said it was from a herbalist she knew in the village, but I never saw the person. Blessing brought the package to me herself." Ifeanyi's eyes narrowed slightly. "So you never met the herbalist?" Amara shook her head. "Number I didn't even know the name." Blessing handled everything. A heavy silence hung between them as Ifeanyi processed the information. The pieces were beginning to fall into place, but the picture they were forming was far darker than she had anticipated. "I'm going to look into Blessing," Ifeanyi said finally. "There's something about this that doesn't add up." Amara's heart sank. Blessing had been her last lifeline in that house, the one person she had trusted. The idea that Blessing might have deceived her, that she might have been part of something far more sinister, was almost too much to bear. But deep down, Amara knew that Ifeanyi was right. There were too many unanswered questions, too many loose ends. Over the next few days, Ifeanyi and her team began digging into Blessing's background. What they uncovered was both shocking and deeply troubling. Blessing's past was far more complicated than anyone had realized. She had been employed by the Udo family for years, but her records showed a series of mysterious gaps, periods of time where she had disappeared without explanation. Ifeanyi also discovered that Blessing had a reputation for being fiercely private. She rarely spoke to her colleagues, and when she did, it was always about work. But there were whispers, rumors of a past filled with hardship and pain. One former housemaid recalled a strange incident that had happened shortly after Amara left the mansion. According to her, Blessing had become withdrawn and anxious, as though something had shaken her to her core. And then, just as suddenly, she had returned to her usual calm, composed self. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make Ifeanyi dig deeper. She tracked down Blessing's former neighbors, old friends, anyone who might have known her before she began working for the Udos. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge, a pattern of betrayal, survival, and quiet revenge. Ifeanyi learned that Blessing had been deeply wronged in the past, though the details remained elusive. But one thing became clear. Blessing was not the quiet, obedient housemaid she appeared to be. She was someone who knew how to bide her time, someone who had learned to mask her true feelings behind a veil of quiet servitude. When Ifeanyi returned to the prison to speak with Amara again, her expression was grim. "I think Blessing may have had her own reasons for wanting Enkay dead," she said quietly, her eyes locked onto Amara's. Amara's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" "I mean that Blessing may have used you," Ifeanyi said. "She knew you were desperate. She knew you'd do anything to make Enkay stop, and she gave you those herbs knowing exactly what they would do." Amara stared at her, the weight of Ifeanyi's words pressing down on her like a heavy stone. "You think she set me up?" Ifeanyi nodded. "It's possible. We don't have all the evidence yet, but everything points to Blessing having a hidden motive, a vendetta against Enkay." Amara felt a surge of anger and betrayal. Why would she do that? Why would she use me like that? "I don't know," Ifeanyi admitted, "but we're going to find out." The The revelation left Amara reeling. For months, she had believed that she was responsible for Ekong's death, that her desperation had led to his downfall. But now the truth was starting to surface, and it was far more twisted than she could have imagined. As Ifeanyi left the prison that day, Amara sat alone in her cell, her mind racing with questions. Who was Blessing, really? What had happened to her in that mansion that had driven her to such lengths? And most importantly, would the truth be enough to set Amara free, or had the damage already been done? In the darkness of her cell, Amara whispered a silent vow. She would uncover the truth no matter the cost, and when she did, she would make sure that no one, especially Blessing, could ever manipulate her again. Ifeanyi's investigation into Blessing's past deepened with every new lead. What had initially seemed like a straightforward case, a desperate wife trying to escape an abusive marriage, was unraveling into something far more sinister. The more Ifeanyi dug, the clearer it became that Blessing was hiding something dark, and it was time to confront her. Blessing had always been careful, blending into the background like wallpaper, keeping her secrets close. But after Amara's imprisonment and Ekong's death, she had quietly resigned from her job at the Udo mansion and vanished without a trace. Finding her was no easy task, but Ifeanyi's determination didn't waver. With the help of her colleagues at the Innocence Project, she traced Blessing to a small neighborhood on the outskirts of town. Blessing now lived in a modest one-room apartment in a rundown building, far removed from the luxury of the Udo mansion. She had changed her phone number and cut off contact with her former colleagues, but she hadn't completely disappeared. Ifeanyi knocked on the door one humid afternoon, her heart racing as she prepared to meet the woman who might hold the key to Amara's freedom. When Blessing opened the door, her face registered surprise, but only for a split second. Her features quickly rearranged themselves into a mask of calm indifference. "Yes?" she asked, her voice cool but wary. "My name is Ifeanyi," the lawyer said, offering a small, polite smile. "I'm with the Innocence Project. May I come in? I'd like to ask you a few questions about Amara Udo." Blessing's eyes narrowed slightly, but after a brief hesitation, she stepped aside and allowed Ifeanyi to enter. The apartment was sparsely furnished, a worn couch, a small table, and a single chair. There were no personal touches, no photos or decorations. It was the kind of place that suggested someone who didn't plan to stay long. "What do you want to know?" Blessing asked, crossing her arms and leaning against the wall. Ifeanyi sat down on the edge of the couch, placing her notebook on her lap. "I've been reviewing Amara's case," she said carefully, "and there are some things that don't add up, specifically the herbal mixture that she gave Ekong. She told me that you were the one who gave it to her." Blessing's expression didn't change, but Ifeanyi noticed a flicker of something, unease perhaps, in her eyes. "Yes, I gave her the herbs," Blessing said evenly. "She asked for help, and I found someone who could provide them." "Who?" Ifeanyi pressed. "Who gave you the herbs?" Blessing hesitated, then shrugged. "A herbalist I used to know in my village." "What was their name?" Ifeanyi asked, her tone gentle but insistent. Blessing's lips tightened. "It was a long time ago. I don't remember." Ifeanyi leaned forward slightly, her eyes locked onto Blessing's. "Blessing, this is important. Amara is facing life in prison because of those herbs. If there's anything you're not telling me, now is the time to come clean." For a long moment, Blessing said nothing. She stared at Ifeanyi with a cold, unreadable expression, as though weighing her options. Then, slowly, she exhaled and sat down on the chair across from the lawyer. "I didn't want her to suffer," Blessing said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want any of this to happen." "Then tell me the truth," Ifeanyi urged. "What really happened?" Blessing lowered her gaze, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them together in her lap. "Ekong wasn't a good man," she said finally. "You know that, don't you? He wasn't just abusive to Amara. He hurt other people too, people like me." Ifeanyi's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Blessing hesitated, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "After Amara left him, I stayed behind. I needed the job and I thought I could handle it. But one night he came home drunk, and he did things to me." Her voice broke and she wiped a tear from her cheek. "He threatened me, said he'd ruin my life if I told anyone, so I stayed quiet. I didn't know what else to do. Ifeanyi's chest tightened with anger and sorrow, but she kept her voice steady. And that's why you gave Amara the herbs? Because you wanted revenge? Blessing nodded, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. I knew she was desperate. I knew she'd do anything to make him leave her alone. So I gave her the herbs. I told her they would calm him down, but I knew what they would really do. I knew they would kill him. The confession hung in the air like a dark cloud, heavy with the weight of betrayal and regret. Why didn't you just leave? Ifeanyi asked softly. Why not walk away? Blessing shook her head. You don't just walk away from people like Enkay. He would have found me. He would have destroyed me. Killing him was the only way I could be free. Ifeanyi leaned back, trying to process what she had just heard. Blessing's confession changed everything. It wasn't Amara who had killed Enkay. It was Blessing. And now, with this new evidence, Amara might finally have a chance to clear her name. But there was still one more question that needed to be answered. Blessing, Ifeanyi said carefully, are you willing to testify? Are you willing to tell the court what really happened? Blessing's eyes widened in fear. If I do that, the Udo family will come after me. You don't understand how powerful they are. We'll protect you, Ifeanyi promised, but we need your testimony. It's the only way to free Amara. Blessing hesitated, her fear palpable, but after a long pause, she nodded. I'll do it, she said quietly. I'll tell the truth. I owe Amara that much. Ifeanyi reached across the table and gently squeezed Blessing's hand. You're doing the right thing, she said, and I promise we'll see this through together. As Ifeanyi left the apartment that day, she felt a surge of hope. The truth was finally coming to light, and with Blessing's testimony, Amara might finally have a chance at freedom. But she also knew that the fight was far from over, and that the Udo family would not give up without a battle. Amara sat silently in her cell, her mind racing after Ifeanyi's latest visit. The news of Blessing's confession had left her reeling. For months, she had lived under the crushing guilt of believing that her desperation had led to Enkay's death. She had carried the burden of that tragedy alone, convinced that she was responsible, that she had unknowingly poisoned him. But now the truth was out, and it was far more devastating than anything she had imagined. Blessing, the quiet, dependable housemaid whom Amara had trusted in her darkest moments, had betrayed her. Not out of malice toward her, but to satisfy her own need for revenge against Enkay. Amara's hands trembled as she processed the weight of that betrayal. She had been a pawn, manipulated into doing something that had changed her life forever. Her thoughts drifted back to those last days with Enkay. She could still see his face, pale and drawn, as the poison slowly weakened him. She had thought the herbal mixture was helping, that it was giving her the space to breathe. But all along, it had been killing him, and she had been too blind, too desperate to see it. Tears pricked her eyes, and she wiped them away angrily. She didn't want to cry anymore. She had shed enough tears for Enkay, for herself, for the life that had been stolen from her. But the anger remained, simmering beneath the surface like a volcano ready to erupt. When Ifeanyi had told her about Blessing's confession, Amara's initial reaction had been shock, but that shock quickly gave way to rage. How could Blessing do this to her? How could she use her pain and fear to further her own agenda? Amara understood the desire for revenge. She had lived with it herself during those long, agonizing years with Enkay. But to drag someone else down in the process, to sacrifice another person's freedom, it was unforgivable. And yet, there was a part of her that understood Blessing's actions. She knew what it felt like to be trapped, powerless, at the mercy of someone who believed they could do whatever they wanted without consequence. She knew the fear, the shame, the desperation that came from living under the control of a man like Enkay, and she knew how tempting it was to take matters into your own hands when justice seemed out of reach. Amara leaned back against the cold wall of her cell, closing her eyes, as a wave of exhaustion washed over her. She was tired of fighting, tired of grieving, tired of feeling like her life was slipping through her fingers. But Ifeanyi's words echoed in her mind, reminding her that there was still a chance, still a glimmer of hope. Blessing is willing to testify, Ifeanyi had said. Her confession could change everything. Could it really? Amara wasn't sure. The Udo family was powerful, and they had already made it clear that they wanted her to pay for Enkay's death. Even with Blessing's testimony, there was no guarantee that the courts would believe her. And if they didn't, she would remain in this prison for the rest of her life, forever branded as a murderer. But what choice did she have? She couldn't give up now, not when the truth was finally coming to light, not when there was still a chance, no matter how small, that she could clear her name. As she sat in the dim light of her cell, Amara thought about Blessing. She pictured the woman's quiet, composed face, the way she had always moved through the house without drawing attention to herself. She had seemed so ordinary, so unremarkable, but underneath that calm exterior had been a storm brewing, a storm fueled by pain and rage and a thirst for justice. Amara wondered what it must have been like for Blessing, living in that house after she left, enduring Enkay's abuse without anyone to turn to. She wondered how many nights Blessing had cried herself to sleep, how many days she had walked through the halls of that mansion feeling invisible, powerless, broken. And in that moment, Amara's anger softened just a little. She still felt betrayed, still felt the sting of Blessing's deception, but she also felt something else, empathy. They had both been victims of the same man, trapped in the same nightmare. And while Blessing's actions had hurt her deeply, Amara couldn't ignore the fact that, in the end, they had both been fighting the same battle. Amara exhaled slowly, wiping away the last traces of her tears. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if Blessing's testimony would be enough to set her free. But she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to let Enkay's shadow control her any longer. She had spent too much of her life living in fear, and it was time to reclaim her power. As the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, signaling the arrival of the guards for the evening head count, Amara sat up straighter. She was ready to fight, ready to face whatever came next. Because for the first time in a long time, she wasn't just surviving. She was fighting to live. The courtroom was packed, buzzing with tension, as Amara sat at the defendant's table, her heart pounding in her chest. Beside her, Ifeanyi gave her a reassuring nod, but Amara barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the witness stand, where Blessing sat, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared to deliver the testimony that could change everything. Blessing's voice was shaky at first, but as she began to recount the abuse she had suffered at Enkay's hands, a steely resolve took over. She described in painful detail the night Enkay had assaulted her and the fear and humiliation that had haunted her ever since. She admitted that she had given Amara the herbal mixture, knowing it was poison, and explained why she had done it. "I didn't want to hurt Amara," Blessing said, her voice breaking. "I wanted revenge on Enkay, for what he did to me, and for what he did to her." Gasps rippled through the courtroom, and Amara felt tears sting her eyes. This was the truth she had waited so long to hear. And now, with Blessing's confession, she finally had a chance to reclaim her freedom and rebuild her shattered life. Amara stood outside the prison gates, the sunlight warming her face for the first time in months. The air smelled different, fresh, free. She closed her eyes, savoring the moment, letting the weight of her past begin to lift from her shoulders. She was free. After months of imprisonment, countless sleepless nights, and a harrowing trial, justice had finally been served. Beside her, Ifeanyi smiled, her eyes filled with quiet triumph. "You did it, Amara," she said softly. "You never gave up." Amara nodded, though her heart was still heavy with everything she had endured. She would never forget the pain, the betrayal, or the darkness of those days. But as she looked ahead, she saw something she hadn't dared to hope for in a long time, a future. Blessing's testimony had changed everything. With her confession and the evidence Ifeanyi's team had gathered, Amara's conviction had been overturned. It hadn't been easy, and the scars would remain, but now, standing at the threshold of a new life, Amara knew she had a second chance. As she walked away from the prison, each step felt lighter, as though she was finally leaving the ghosts of her past behind. Hope had returned, and with it, the promise of a new beginning.